Thank you. I want to make sure, since I haven't seen this until now, and I'm trying to absorb what you're saying.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
As the medical board, you're reasonably confident of your ability, once a case comes before you, to make a decision upon how that license is treated. But if I just want to make sure I understand you correctly, but one of your biggest limitations is it getting from this peer review system to you.
Correct.
You stated something that was striking to me, and I suppose it varies from hospital to hospital, and that is that the peer review system may depend upon someone working after hours, unpaid, on a voluntary basis to do this. Now, is this commonly a physician who we all know work all kinds of hours, or is this commonly a administrative person who is using whatever method that hospital uses? Who are these people? Whoever knows. I'm trying to figure out. You've said that there's enormous variation, which makes sense to me. I'm trying to find out who these people are and how it might be made more systematic. But if there's a smaller hospital that can't afford to hire someone full time, that's very different from a larger hospital.
Good afternoon, Alan Giberson. I'm one of the co-authors. I'm an internist at a 400-bed tertiary hospital in San Jose, and I've been on the peer review committee and patient safety. It varies a lot by the institution. If it's a large institution, a medical center, Sutter, Kaiser, they have routine staff that will do it, including physicians. For the mid-size and smaller hospitals, it's usually the doctors during lunch hour get a free lunch, but have to spend there an hour or so going over this. The nursing staff, often our administration, will identify a problem. The physicians will then review it. The difficulty in the medium or small hospitals is that you may know this person, you may be in coverage with this person, you may be in competition with this person, so it can raise a whole number of issues. And obviously there'll be weeks and sometimes months as you go through this investigation of trying to get what are the facts involved.
Yeah, you brought that up, and that would seem to me to be extremely difficult when these truly are your peers and vary immensely. How do you, there must be a certain degree of, I don't know what you call failure rate. I mean, there's got to be problems that you don't discover just because you don't discover them. The patient doesn't understand that something hasn't been performed properly. There's no lawsuit filed. There's no nursing staff that are reporting something. Has there been any determination to try to find out sort of an error rate or a rate at which you don't uncover these things?
What hospitals typically do in health plans and other medical groups is they randomly select a small percentage of patients or cases or events and routinely screen those. So that's the screening process.
When you say systematically, you mean actually in some
Right.
roughly statistically valid.
That's right.
approach.
But you say, oh, I'm going to pull 5% of Dr. So-and-so's records, or 5% of orthopedic records, or 5%, depending on the size of the hospital. So then they go over those records and compare them to standards of care that they are aware of and have set up for their organization. Sometimes each organization is different, but hopefully similar. And if they fall, they call it falling out of the screen. So if they don't meet the standard of care, if they fall out of the screen, then those, and that's that's called explicit peer review, where usually a nurse goes through and sees whether the person has met the standard of care. Physician has done.
Typically a nurse,
Almost always a nurse.
as opposed to another physician.
Well, this is the initial stage. Okay, so then if the patient falls out of that screen, then it goes to either a department meeting or a department committee peer review meeting, like an orthopedic committee or a cardiac committee, or depending on the size of the hospital, may go through a couple of committees until it gets to the medical executive committee, which is usually the decision-making group.
Okay.
And then that's the group that has to do further
Okay.
investigation.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm getting a little bit of feel.
I mean, if it's an adverse event, if it's an unexpected
She's
death
listening.
or so forth, that might come right away. But otherwise, it'll
Yeah,
come through this.
but it might be a nurse initially seeing it or a physician. Just one other final question. Since we're not, I mean, I suppose some of these at the extreme might be considered malpractice, but I assume a lot of it is not what would constitute malpractice. It's just, does it meet the standard of care that you would like? Does this include things like procedures, ranges of procedures that are not up to date? And I don't know if this would be a good example, but you said you were a cardiologist. So say someone is using a stent that is very old as opposed to some more modern one, or a technique, a surgical technique that may have been common when this person was being trained, but many years down the road, there's a much more advanced procedure that is commonly used. Is that something that would fall in this range, or is that something typically, as long as it's, you know?
Well, in terms of standard of care, perhaps an example would be somebody that is used to taking out gallbladders by making an incision versus somebody that takes out gallbladders laparoscopically. As long as both of them give good outcomes, you know, the standard is that you get a good outcome. It's not exactly how you do it.
What if the outcome varies, though, and there is a more modern technique or device that yields better outcomes, but maybe the physician, you know, doesn't want to take the extra training or time to do that?
Well, these things can fall out, and most peer review includes what they call CQI, continuous quality improvement.
Okay.
So we pick certain indicators, and if it's like length of stay because the open cholecystectomy stays longer and so forth, you know, we focus and we try to educate the physicians and improve their skills or give them new skills. I think that it's hard to buy a stent that's outdated because if they're outdated, they're
They aren't
probably
on the
not sold.
market.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, another example is beta blockers for heart attack, isn't that? I mean, that's a standard of care, and yet some physicians don't order it, some patients don't get it. So if the standard of care in that organization is written somewhere and can be compared to that patient's chart, then that's one way that it might happen. However, you would need to have physicians in that organization who had created that standard of care that would know that, because every hospital creates their own standard, or every
Yeah, it's just interesting to me because I happen to be familiar with a situation where there is a medical device which is FDA approved, which is clearly the highest standard of care, but a lower standard of care is all that will be approved by the health plan, even though the cost is not different. And that's why it's just interesting to me how that's treated. Thank you.